The stranger in the drive-through rain had been falling since dawn, soft at first, then steady, then relentless. Cars moved slowly through the gray morning in Palo Alto, their wipers slicing through the downpour like tired arms in a long race. Inside a rented Toyota Camry, Sundar Pichai sat quietly, watching the rain trickle down his windshield. It was a rare day without meetings, without cameras, without the pressure of making decisions that would ripple across the world. He had asked his driver to take the day off. He wanted silence. He wanted to be alone. He had driven for hours, stopping. Nowhere in particular. His thoughts were heavy. Not because of work, although that was always complex, but because of something deeper, something that had been gnawing at him for weeks. It was a kind of restlessness, a need to feel something. Real again, to reconnect with the world beyond the boardrooms and screens. He didn't know exactly what he was searching for, but he knew he needed to find a dot as the rain grew heavier. Sundar pulled into a small shopping center just off the highway. Most of the stores were still closed, except for a 24-hour McDonald's glowing dimly in the corner. He hadn't eaten all day. He didn't particularly want fast food, but he didn't care. He just needed something, anything to break the fog in his mind. He drove to the drive-thru, rolled down the window halfway, and waited. The speaker crackled. A voice came through, soft, uncertain, tired. Double quotes. Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order? Sundar paused. There was something in the voice. Not the usual mechanical cheerfulness. Not the scripted rhythm of someone saying the same thing 1,000 times a day. This voice sounded thoughtful, like the person behind it. It was somewhere far away in their mind. Yeah? Sundar said, hesitating. Just a coffee. Black. Okay. Please pull up to the second window. As he inched forward, he noticed the line was moving slower than usual. The rain drummed louder on the roof. The engine hummed quietly. When he reached the second window, he saw him. The young man working the window was in his early 30s, maybe younger. His face was thin, tired, but intelligent. His eyes were sharp, though something about them was hidden, like a fire that had been quietly burning in a room no one visited anymore. His uniform was soaked at the edges, and his hands were shaking slightly as he held the paper cup out to. Sundar, here you go, he said, without looking up. And then Sundar noticed something strange. The man's name. Tag read, Arjun. But what caught Sundar's attention was not the name. It was the small notebook tucked just behind the window register. Something about the way it was filled. Lines and lines of code, not random doodles. Actual algorithms, calculations, logic trees. Even from a glance, Sundar could tell this wasn't someone doodling to pass the time. He took the coffee, but instead of driving away, he stayed. Just a moment longer. Do you study computer science? Sundar asked, casually, but kindly. The man looked up for the first time, surprised, cautious. Double quotes I. Used to, he said, voice low. A while ago. Sundar nodded. He didn't press. He knew that tone. It was the sound of someone with a story they weren't ready to tell, but the silence between them felt thick. Not uncomfortable, just full. Used to write code on napkins, Sundar said, half smiling. In college, sometimes at train stations, sometimes on the back of receipts. I know what it's like to carry ideas around when no one's asking for them. Arjun's face changed. Not a full smile. But something opened. Something softened. Double quotes, yeah, he said. I still do that. Even though it's not really useful anymore. You never know, Sundar said gently. Sometimes the ideas we think don't matter end up changing everything. A long silence passed between them. The line of cars behind Sundar began to grow. A horn honked once. But he didn't move. Arjun looked like he wanted to say something. Like there was a storm inside him that had been waiting for the right moment to break. I was a software engineer at Tesla, he said suddenly. I worked in their AI division. Helped build models for autonomous navigation, edge case prediction, real-time reaction systems. Sundar's eyes widened, but he stayed calm. That's impressive. It was, Arjun said, until I got laid off. COVID hit, family problems. My dad got sick. I moved back home. Couldn't find another job. Had to make ends meet. So here I am. The words were plain, but the pain behind them was not. Sundar understood. More than Arjun could know. That must have been hard, he said. It still is. A manager's voice called from inside. Annoyed. Arjun, keep the line moving. Arjun winced. Sorry. I need to... But Sundar held up a hand. One last thing, he said. What was your biggest idea at Tesla? Arjun hesitated. His eye flickered to the notebook. Then back to Sundar. A theory about emotional mapping for AI. Trying to teach cars not just to react, but to feel intent. Like if a pedestrian hesitates at a curb, the car doesn't just see the movement, it understands hesitation, fear, uncertainty. I wrote a white paper on it, but it never got implemented. Not enough data, not enough interest. Maybe too early. Sundar didn't speak right away, but his heart was racing. He knew this idea, or rather, he knew its importance. He had seen early concepts of emotional AI, but nothing with that level of intuitive mapping. Do you still have that paper? He asked. Somewhere. Arjun said, probably buried in my old drive. Sundar reached for his wallet, but instead of money, he pulled out a business card. It was simple, plain, just his name and an email. If you ever want to talk, he said, really talk about your ideas, about what's next. Send me that paper. Arjun took the card, stunned. He looked at it, then back at Sundar. The disbelief was plain in his eyes. Double quotes, weak ... Are you? But Sundar just smiled. And drove away. As the Camry pulled back onto the wet highway, the coffee untouched, the rain now only a whisper. Sundar felt something stir inside him. Something warm. Something hopeful. He didn't know what would come of it. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But he knew one thing for certain. He was going to read that paper. And he wasn't going to forget the man who had once dreamed of giving machines the power to understand human fear. The paper that shouldn't exist, Rain had finally stopped by the time Sundar reached home, though the sky still hung low and heavy, like a blanket not ready to be pulled away. He stepped inside the quiet house, placed the coffee untouched on the counter, and stood still for a moment. There was a strange weight in his chest, not the kind that dragged a person down, but the kind that made them feel like something important had just passed by, like a rare comet skimming the edge of their life. He walked to his study and sat at the large wooden desk that had seen years of global decisions, thousands of emails, interviews, and sleepless nights. But now it became the setting for something simpler, more human. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a slim folder labeled A-Ethics, Experimental Archives. It was one of the first projects he had funded when he stepped into leadership, back when everyone else was focused only on speed, efficiency, and scale. Inside the folder were pages of research, printed code snippets, and concept maps. One in particular caught his attention, a small paragraph, scribbled in someone's handwriting. Discussing the potential of emotional modeling for machine learning systems, he squinted. The handwriting wasn't familiar. The name beside it read, A-M-E-A-H. His eyes widened. He flipped the page over. Then the next. All of them referenced edge case prediction, micro-behavioral indicators, and something called the hesitation index, a model designed to detect subtle pauses in human movement as indicators of doubt, fear, or indecision. These weren't just rough ideas. They were structured, detailed, even visionary. Yet somehow they had never made it into production. He pulled open his laptop and began typing furiously. He logged into the internal research database and searched for the name .nothing. No published work, no citations, no research linked to Tesla's AI labs. Either. He searched LinkedIn. A few Arjun Mehras came up, none working in tech anymore. Leaned back in his chair. This didn't make sense. How could someone so advanced, so ahead of their time, simply vanish. He remembered the way Arjun's hands trembled slightly, the way his voice held both pride and shame, and the small notebook. Next to the register, quietly filled with ideas no one was reading. Something inside Sundar stirred. This wasn't just a story about a man who had once worked at Tesla and now served fries. This was about something bigger. He walked to the window. Outside, the world was still wet and glistening. The streets shimmered under the streetlights. A car passed slowly, splashing through a puddle. He thought of his own journey, the times he had felt invisible, when he had ideas but no audience, dreams but no platform. He thought of his mother packing his lunch in Chennai, telling him softly, "Never forget that every person knows something you don't, and every story matters." He turned back to the desk and opened a blank email. Subject: the hesitation index body. "Dear Arjun, if you still have that paper, please send it. I believe there's something in it that the world missed. Let's talk. No pressure. Just one conversation." Sundar hit send and waited. Arjun sat on the brake bench behind the McDonald's, his uniform clinging to him from the rain earlier. The notebook rested on his lap. The sun was just beginning to set behind the buildings, and the air smelled of fried oil and damp asphalt. He had looked at the card a dozen times that day, unsure if it was a joke, a mistake, or worse, a cruel trick by fate. He had tried to forget it, told himself it didn't matter. But the truth was, something inside him had cracked open. Something he thought had closed years ago. His phone buzzed. A single notification from Sundar Pichai, subject. The hesitation index, his hands trembled again. But this time it wasn't from exhaustion. It was something else. He read the message twice, then opened his old drive, where the paper had lived untouched for 3 years. He had written it in the middle of long nights, between hospital visits, arguments with his brother, and the slow unraveling of a life he had once fought so hard to build. He attached the file. And replied, "I don't know if it's still relevant, but it meant everything to me once. Thank you." Sundar opened the file within minutes of receiving it. As he scrolled through the document, he felt something rare. Something like awe. It wasn't just theory. It was intuition, grounded in logic. It spoke of machines understanding not only data, but the fragility of human behavior. It proposed training neural nets to recognize emotional stutters, how people pause before stepping into the street, how their shoulders tighten when afraid, how a second hesitation can be the key between safety and disaster. One passage stood out. Cars may never feel, but they can be taught to care, not in the human sense, but in the way a bird cares about wind, through attention, through sensitivity, through the deep listening of the world's quiet signals. Sundar felt goosebumps rise on his arms. This was more than research. It was a manifesto for a future that could actually protect people, especially those too easily overlooked by data. Children, the elderly, people in distress. He knew what he had to do. He scheduled a meeting with the internal ethics and AI development team, not for a review, not for a memo. He was going to bring Arjun in, but not as a consultant. As a partner. The next morning, Sundar sent a short message. "Arjun, can you meet me tomorrow? I want you to walk me through the paper." Not as a job interview. Just two people talking about what matters. "We'll meet somewhere, quiet." Arjun stared at the message for a long time. Then slowly, as if testing whether it was real, he typed, "Yeah." Then he whispered it out loud to himself, as though needing to believe it. Double quotes, "Yes." The next day, at a small, quiet cafe tucked behind an old library, Sundar arrived early. He chose a table near the window. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, casting a golden light across the street. Arjun arrived 5 minutes later, holding the notebook, wearing a borrowed shirt that still had creases from being folded too long. His shoes were worn, his eyes tired. But his presence carried something new. Hope. They sat down. No press, no cameras, no suits. Just a notebook, 2 coffees, and the sound of people walking by. Arjun opened the book. "I never showed this to anyone," he said. "I stopped believing it mattered." Show me, Sundar said, his voice soft. Start from the beginning. As Arjun began to speak, his voice steadying with each word, Sundar leaned in. The street noise faded. The cafe disappeared. And the world for just a moment. Listen. Asterisk. The boardroom and the backlash meeting room was silent. Not in the way most boardrooms are before a pitch, but in that heavy, brittle kind of silence that fills a room when people don't know what to expect. The windows stretched floor to ceiling, showing a slice of the morning skyline, blue and cold. Inside, 5 of Google's top AI architects sat around the oval table, laptops open, fingers still, expressions unreadable. Each of them had built technologies that had touched billions. They were visionaries, skeptics, sometimes rivals. Sundar stood at the head of the room. He looked calm, but his eyes moved, often measuring, watching, waiting. Beside him, dressed in borrowed clothes and still slightly out of place in the sleek, sterile environment, stood Arjun. He didn't speak. He was scanning the room, trying to hide the small but rising panic beneath his calm exterior. He had no slides, no presentation deck. All he had was his notebook and an idea the world had quietly stepped over. Thank you for coming, Sundar said, voice steady. What we're about to discuss isn't just another project. It's a forgotten idea. One that I believe could reshape the way we think about safety and empathy in autonomous systems. I'll let Arjun explain. Arjun took a breath. You didn't look at the room? Not yet. He opened the notebook, his fingers pausing briefly on a smudge of ink in the corner. A mark from a night spent at his father's hospital bed. Writing in? The dim light. My name is Arjun, he began. I used to work at Tesla in AI development. Most of my work involved real-time response systems. But during that time, I noticed something missing, something subtle. A gap between how machines understand movement and how they fail to understand intent. He turned a page. The others watched in silence. We've trained AI to detect motion. We've trained it to predict outcomes. But we haven't trained it to feel tension, to recognize human hesitation, fear, the micro delays that reveal doubt. I called it the hesitation index. One of the engineers, a woman with sharp glasses and a colder tone, leaned back. How do you quantify something as abstract as fear? Arjun nodded. You don't try to feel it. You train the model to recognize the physical markers that precede it, like microsecond pauses in a pedestrian's gait, shoulder shrinkage, downward gaze, hesitation in stride. These are not errors. They're patterns. And when AI ignores them, it misses the very signals that can save a life. Another engineer, younger, skeptical, but curious, frowned slightly. But wouldn't that create more false positives? Cars braking too often, interpreting normal. Behavior is dangerous, maybe at first, Arjun said. But think of it this way. A human driver, even a nervous one, instinctively slows when they sense doubt from someone about to cross the street. Not because they calculate it, but because they feel the weight of it. Machines can't feel, but they can be trained to notice. The same clues if we show them what to look for. The room remained still. Sundar's gaze moved across the table, reading the expressions. Some were thinking. Some were dismissing it already. What happened to this work at Tesla? The woman asked. Why didn't they develop it further? Arjun hesitated. Budget cuts, he said. Resource reallocation. And to be honest, I didn't fight for it hard enough. My father got sick. I left. The idea stayed buried. The woman leaned back. Or maybe it stayed buried because it wasn't strong enough. A silence followed. Arjun looked down. For a second, the weight of years pressed down. On him again, the doubt. The humiliation. The belief that maybe he really wasn't good enough. Then Sundar spoke. Or maybe, he said quietly, it stayed buried because the system makes it hard for certain voices to be heard. Especially when they don't come in with credentials. And polished decks. His voice was calm, but the edge in it was unmistakable. I've read the paper, Sundar continued. Twice. It doesn't just have technical merit. It has vision, and it's asking us to stop designing systems purely around efficiency and start building with empathy in mind. That's not a weakness. It's the future. Another engineer leaned forward. If it's that good, why bring it here? Why not develop it quietly with a small team? Because we've seen what happens when brilliant ideas get trapped in silos, Sundar replied. This time, I want to do it differently, openly, with intention. He turned to Arjun. Will you walk them through the edge case model? Arjun nodded. He flipped to a marked page. In training data, edge cases are usually trimmed or flattened to preserve model accuracy. But what if we inverted the model? What if edge cases' moments of fear, hesitation, panic became the data we trained around? First, not the anomaly, but the foundation? The younger engineer blinked. You're suggesting we prioritize uncertainty? Yes, Arjun said, because that's where the human experience lives. In the uncertain. The woman shook her head, not unkindly. You're asking us to rebuild part of the foundation. That's not a small ask. I know, Arjun said. But we've spent decades teaching machines to be sure. Maybe it's time we teach them how to doubt, carefully, purposefully. There was a pause. And then, to everyone's surprise, the youngest engineer spoke. I want to help. The woman frowned slightly. You're serious? Asterisk, yeah, I think he's right. Hesitation isn't noise. It's information. We've just been ignoring it. Sundar looked around the room. Not demanding, not pleading. Just waiting. After a long moment, two more engineers nodded. Finally. The woman said, I'm not convinced yet, but I'm willing to listen. And in that moment, something shifted. A door that had long been shut. Sometimes by arrogance. Sometimes by inertia opened, just a crack. That evening, Arjun stepped outside the building into the soft light of the setting sun. The world looked different, even though nothing had changed. Sundar walked beside him. They didn't say much, but the silence was no longer heavy. As they reached the sidewalk, Sundar stopped. How did you keep going? He asked. Asterisk, Arjun looked up. His eyes were tired but clear. I didn't, he said. Not always. Some days I just survived. But I kept writing. Even if no one read it. Even if it made no sense to keep believing, I think I just wasn't ready to stop dreaming. Sundar nodded slowly. Sometimes that's all it takes, he said. One person refusing to stop. They parted ways with a simple handshake. No titles, no promises. Just a quiet agreement that something was beginning. But what neither of them knew, what no one could know, was that in less than 3 weeks, this project would face a backlash from within Google itself. Asterisk. And Arjun, the quiet man who once took orders at a drive-thru, would become the center of a firestorm. Asterisk. The storm inside the system it started with a whisper. A quiet shift in tone during meetings. Slight changes in body language. Long pauses. Before approvals, and then more directly, questions that no longer felt curious but strategic. The hesitation index was only 3 weeks into active development. Arjun was now working out of a small lab space inside one of Google's research buildings, far from the buzz of the main campus. Sundar had arranged the space himself. No cameras, no press. Just code, coffee, and quiet focus. The team had grown. To 5 engineers, the youngest one, Arav, had become Arjun's closest collaborator. They stayed late most nights, running simulations, testing edge models, tweaking confidence thresholds for the emotional intent engine. Their progress was slow, but steady. And every now and then, in the middle of some breakthrough, Arjun would look up from his screen and feel something he hadn't felt in years. Dignity. But not everyone was cheering for the project. One morning, Arjun opened his inbox to find an email from Google's internal review committee. It was brief. Your project has been flagged for rapid ethics review due to concerns related to data privacy, psychological profiling, and potential user risk. He stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't unexpected, but the speed of it unsettled him. Ethics reviews usually took months. This had been triggered in less than 3 weeks. He walked straight to Sundar's office. "It's happening," he said, holding out his phone. Sundar read the email silently, then looked up. "I thought it might. So what do we do?" Sundar leaned back in his chair. The room around him was silent. No assistance. No interruptions. Just a man staring out the window at a company he had spent half his life building. "We do what we said we would," Sundar replied. "We listen, we answer their questions, but we don't back down." But what Sundar didn't say not yet was that this wasn't just an ordinary ethics concern. Behind the review was someone he hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Vian Malhotra. He was once Sundar's most trusted advisor in AI policy. Brilliant, driven, but increasingly rigid. He had grown frustrated with Sundar's emphasis on social impact and emotional intelligence in AI design. "Machines aren't therapists," Vihan once said. "They're tools. Don't confuse human values with machine purpose." He had left the leadership team quietly, but not without warning. "One day, the kindness you believe in will slow this company down," Vihan had said. "And the system will reject it." Sundar never forgot those words. And now it seemed that the system was beginning to stir. 2 days later, the review session was held, not in a glassy conference room, but in a low-lit, soundproof hall with no windows. Arjun walked in alone. He had offered to let the engineers join him. They all wanted to, but he had said no. "This is my paper," he had told them. "I'll answer for it." A panel of 6 people sat at the long table. Only one of them looked at him when he entered. The others were already tapping on laptops. Their faces unreadable. A woman with short hair and a red folder cleared her throat. "Please state your name and role." "Arjun Mehra, software researcher, AI development." "Do you have formal training in machine ethics?" "Not formally, but I've studied the intersection of behavioral psychology and AI modeling, most of it through independent research." "Is your project collecting emotional behavior data from real users?" "Not yet," Arjun said. "We're currently running simulations based on synthetic edge behavior. No live data is involved." A man with sharp eyes leaned forward. "Your paper mentions pedestrian intent modeling. Doesn't that require capturing sensitive behavior patterns from potentially vulnerable individuals?" "It could," Arjun admitted, "which is why we're proposing anonymized sampling with dynamic consent models. The point isn't to track people, it's to teach AI to pause when uncertainty is detected, not to act, to hesitate." A silence followed, the kind that makes your skin tighten. The woman with the red folder leaned back. "How you differentiate between hesitation, that's meaningful, and hesitation, that's noise?" Arjun breathed deeply. "We don't. Not at first. We teach the system to flag the moment, to slow down, to treat uncertainty as a state of value. We don't punish the uncertainty. We preserve it." A brief pause. "So you're saying your system is designed to act unsure?" "I'm saying that sometimes being unsure is the most human response, and that machines need to learn to respect it." More silence. And then the man with sharp eyes asked the question Arjun feared most. "Your file says you were previously employed at Tesla. It also notes you left due to performance issues. Is that accurate?" Arjun froze. "I left to care for my father. He was dying. My performance dropped." "I never disputed that. So you admit to emotional compromise affecting your work?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Sundar, watching from behind a one-way panel, clenched his fists. He had been told he couldn't interfere. Not during the session. Arjun looked directly at the man. "Yes," he said softly. "I was emotionally compromised. My father was dying. And in the middle of all that, I still found time to finish a paper no one asked me to write. That same paper is why I'm here today." The woman closed the red folder. "We'll conclude this session and submit our findings within 72 hours. Arjun walked out alone, his steps steady. But inside he was burning. That night, Arjun sat in his apartment, the lights off. Only the glow of his laptop lit the room. He read through his old Tesla files, emails, looking for something, anything. That might help him prepare for what was coming. He didn't notice the email come in at first. It was from Vihan Malhotra. I remember your paper. I was one of the people who buried it. Not because it lacked value, but because it scared the system. You're back now, and that's a problem. Walk away, for your sake. Arjun stared at the message. His hands trembled. He closed the laptop and whispered to the dark, I'm not walking away this time. The next morning, Sundar called him in. They're not going to approve it, he said. Not unless we make changes that get the entire concept. I know, Arjun replied. Sundar studied him for a long moment. There's one option. He said, I didn't want to use it, not unless you were ready. But we could take this outside the system, publish it independently, open source the model, give the world access. And risk being cut out of Google entirely? Yes, Arjun didn't answer right away. He thought of his father's hands, the notebook. The quiet voice that had kept him alive during the darkest nights. Then he nodded. Let's do it. Asterisk, the release heard around the world. Ignoring the paper went live. The sky over Mountain View was still and colorless, like it hadn't yet decided what kind of day it would become. But inside a small server room on the edge of the Google campus, a quiet act of rebellion was unfolding carefully, legally. And undeniably, public. Arjun sat in front of one another, his fingers resting on the touchpad. Beside him, Sundar watched without speaking. Around them, the room buzzed with the low hum of machines, a sound that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Arjun's thoughts. The hesitation index had been polished, reviewed, checked and rechecked. The models had been tested and refined. The paper was thorough, clear, human. It had been uploaded to an open source platform with detailed explanations, simulation results, and ethical safeguards. No funding announcement. No corporate branding. No media hype. Just a message at the top of the page. We believe machines should be taught to respect human uncertainty. Hesitation is not failure. It's information. It's humanity. Arjun clicked publish. The page loaded. The system confirmed. The paper was live. Outside. The world didn't change. Not visibly. People still rushed to work, checked their phones, sipped their coffee. But somewhere, across hundreds of laptops, tablets, and desktops, something had begun. The first download came within 3 minutes. Then 5 more. Then 20. By the end of the hour, over 1,000 engineers, researchers, and designers from across the world had opened the file. By noon, the hashtags had begun. Hashtag hesitation index, hashtag AI. With heart, hashtag Arjun, me, ARA. The response wasn't just academic. It was emotional. One user wrote, I lost my brother to a self-driving car that didn't slow down. This paper brought tears to my eyes. Finally, someone gets it. Another, been in AI for 10 years. Never read something so technical and so human at the same time. The paper hit a nerve, not just in tech circles, but with people who had long felt voiceless in the age of algorithms. Sundar watched it unfold from his office, quietly stunned. He had seen viral moments before. He had led launches that reached billions. But this felt different. This wasn't a product. It was a perspective. But just as the wave of praise rose, the resistance followed. The first warning came in a call. We've received a legal notice, said the Google legal counsel. It's not internal. It's from an outside firm claiming intellectual property overlap with a confidential Tesla project. Arjun's heart froze. What project? Yes. The lawyer hesitated. Asterisk, a system called IntuitionNet, developed 5 years ago, never released, internal use only. The claim is that you had access to early drafts. Arjun stood still. IntuitionNet was my concept, he said. It got rain after I left. I wasn't even told. I have proof emails, drafts, timestamps. They're on my old drive. Good, the lawyer replied, because this isn't going to go away. The paper's gone viral. Too many eyes on it now. If there's a threat, it won't be quiet. That night, the media finally caught up. Articles poured in, not just from tech blogs, but from major outlets. Headlines ranged from respectful to skeptical. Former Tesla engineer and Sundar Pichai published radical. New AI safety model. Can machines learn to doubt? Inside the hesitation index, Google under pressure after controversial. AI paper goes public, but one headline hit differently. It came from a lesser-known publication, but its tone was sharp. McDonald's to Google. How a fry cook with a broken resume became the voice of AI ethics. Arjun saw it and laughed once, bitterly. They don't know anything about me, he said. Sundar sat across from him in the lab, a quiet frown on his face. They don't, he agreed. But they will. And they'll twist it. This is just the beginning. Arjun didn't answer, because in his chest, something else had begun to ache. Not for publishing, not for the paper, but for something he hadn't told anyone, not even Sundar. 3 days earlier, during a late-night review of his old Tesla drive, Arjun had found a line of code. Not in his voice, not in his hand. A small experimental patch that had been added to his model, without permission, without attribution on it, had been added by a colleague, someone he had once trusted, someone he had suspected of leaking their research to Vihan's team before Arjun left the company. And now, buried deep in the hesitation index, that line of code still lived. Harmless, small, but legally damaging. If someone found it, Tesla's lawyers dug deep enough, this could all be discredited. Not because the model was wrong, but because the ownership could be challenged. Arjun knew he had to tell Sundar. But when? How? And what if this destroyed everything they had just built? The choice was taken from him. On the fifth morning after the release, Sundar received an anonymous message. No greeting. No sign-off. Just a sentence. Check line 7426 of the hesitation. Model. The code isn't all his. Sundar didn't panic. It was beyond that now. He called Arjun into the lab. Closed the door. Then opened the file. Line 7426 sat there. Plain and quiet. A segment of prediction logic that didn't match the rest of the code style. Arjun didn't deny it. I found it 2 days ago, he said softly. Someone added it to my files before I left Tesla. They must have thought I wouldn't notice. Who? His name was Nirav. He was on the same team. Close to Vihan. He always hated the hesitation concept. Thought it made I weaker. But he was smart. Really smart. And he copied my draft structure once. I just never proved it. Sundar nodded slowly. Do you know what this means? They're going to claim the entire model is compromised. Yes. And if they do, no one will trust it. No one will use it. Sundar closed the file. Then we do the only thing we can, he said. We fix it. We rewrite it, and we show the world that even when machines learn to hesitate, we do not. That night, Arjun and Sundar worked side by side. They went through every line. Rebuilt the core engine, refined the logic, not to hide the flaw, but to remove it entirely. And as dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in soft orange light, a new model was born. Clean, verified, transparent. And this time, it carried a new line at the top, written, in the spirit of second chances. But as the sun rose, something darker loomed. A member of their own team had gone silent. Emails bounced. The lab badge was inactive. And the next day, a leaked internal memo surfaced online accusing Sundar of manipulating internal systems to promote unverified research. The name on the leak? AV.*. The silence before the answers building was quiet. Again, too quiet for a company at the center of the world's attention. Outside, reporters stood behind barriers, cameras ready, waiting for anyone to step forward. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The kind of silence that doesn't bring peace, but pressure. Like the air itself is watching, waiting for someone to crack. Sundar sat alone in his office. The walls bare except for a single framed photo of his parents. He had removed the awards, the thank you plaques, even the commemorative chrome pixel. Phone prototype, not in defeat, but in clarity. He didn't need reminders of what he had built. What mattered now was what he chose to protect. A storm was brewing. 3 days had passed since Arav's betrayal. The memo leaked to the press accused Sundar of bypassing internal review protocols to fast-track a controversial AI model. The leak didn't mention Arjun by name, but it didn't have to. The damage was done. Questions began pouring in. Media outlets shifted from praise to suspicion. Sundar wasn't surprised by Arav's disappearance. The young engineer had shown so much promise, but promise without purpose was dangerous. The betrayal wasn't personal. It was systemic. Arav had been approached by one of Vahan's firms, offered money, a position, and power, and he had taken it. But Arjun hadn't flinched. When the leak surfaced. He didn't hide. He stood in front of the team, the engineers who remained, and spoke without fear. They can question the code. They can question my past, but they can't erase what this model stands for. If we abandon it now, then we're not building AI. We're just building faster machines to ignore the very thing that makes us human. The team stayed. Not all of them. But enough. And then, without permission, without ceremony, Arjun did something no one expected. He recorded a video, not a press statement, not a rehearsed address. Just himself, sitting in a small room, a notebook on his lap. The same notebook from McDonald's. The video began with a quiet moment, just silence, no music, no title. Then his voice. My name is Arjun Mehra. You don't know me, but you might have read something I wrote. It's called the Hesitation Index. He looked directly into the camera. I worked at Tesla. I left when my father was dying. I took a job at McDonald's to survive. And I kept writing code because it was the only thing that kept me from disappearing. Completely. No one asked me to build this model. No one funded it. No one believed in it. Not at first. Except one man. He paused. I wanted to tell you what this model really means. It's not just about AI. It's about how we treat people. How we treat those who hesitate, who slow down, who break rhythm, who don't move fast enough for the world. Machines can be trained to recognize fear. But first, we have to stop treating fear as a flaw. His voice didn't shake. It grew steadier, firmer. We live in a time where certainty is rewarded, where quickness is mistaken for intelligence, where hesitation is seen as weakness. But sometimes, hesitation is the bravest thing you can do, because it means you're paying attention. It means you're listening. He picked up the notebook. This model was written in the back of a fast food kitchen. It was written after 10-hour shifts, after cleaning floors, after burying a father. It was written when I thought no one would ever listen, but someone did. He looked up again. You can doubt the code. That's fair. But don't doubt what it's trying to do. This isn't about being right. It's about being better. For once, let's build something that doesn't just serve us, but protects us. Especially in the moments when we don't know what we're doing, when we freeze, when we fear, when we hesitate. He paused. Then ended with one line. The world may not move slower, but maybe our machines can learn to wait. The video was uploaded at midnight. No announcement. No tags. By morning. It had been viewed over 2 million times. The reaction was staggering. People didn't just watch the video. They shared it, translated it, responded to it with stories of their own about being overlooked, unheard, dismissed. Mothers whose autistic children were misunderstood by AI tools. Veterans suffering from PTSD flagged as anomalies by automated systems. School kids misjudged by exam software that couldn't see the fear in their pause. The hesitation index became more than a model. It became a symbol. And with it came unexpected support. A coalition of independent researchers, educators, and ethicists released a public letter defending the paper. Over 3,000 signatures in the first day. Then, to Sundar's shock, a letter arrived. From Tesla's legal team, not a lawsuit. A withdrawal. After internal review. We recognize that the contested code fragment predates our current models and does not constitute proprietary ownership. We extend acknowledgement to Arjun for his contribution to early edge case research. No apology, but a retreat. Sundar printed the letter and handed it to Arjun without a word. Arjun read it, then slowly exhaled like someone coming up for air after years underwater. The following week, Sundar was asked to speak at a global tech ethics conference. He stood on stage, lights blinding, 1,000 faces in the audience, cameras rolling. But he didn't talk about Google or future products. He talked about a notebook, about a man in a drive-thru who once whispered an idea into the rain, about how that whisper had grown louder than any press release. We are not judged by how quickly we move, Sundar said. We are judged by who we slow down for. He ended the talk with Arjun's closing line from the video. Maybe our machines can learn to wait. Asterisk, the crowd stood, not in excitement, but in respect. And somewhere in a small cafe in another city, a young programmer downloaded the hesitation index. Not because she had a deadline, not because it would boost her career, but because she had always been told she thought too slowly. And now, for the first time, she didn't feel broken. She felt seen. Weeks later, Sundar returned to that same McDonald's. Not for coffee. Just to remember. The rain had returned. Soft this time. Steady. He parked his car, stepped out, and stood under the awning. No one recognized him. But he wasn't waiting to be seen. He was waiting to feel something. Asterisk.